Hey, everybody, this is Josh Becerra. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Marketing Podcast. Why are you giggling?
I'm
All
excited.
right, awesome. I'm here with a good friend of mine, so it's more casual today. Heather Boschke.
It's
Heather,
like floral
it
casual. I
is.
like this vibe.
I was telling Heather that this is the last kind of 80-degree day in Minnesota,
hmm
so I got to bring out some of the beachy vibes. So, yeah, I got my floral pattern going.
I dig it.
All right. So, Heather, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself,
Yeah.
not only your marketing experience, but also some of the other things you're working on? It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Heather Boschke, and I'm a corporate career marketer. That's kind of what I've done for the first half of my life, I would say.
Yeah.
22 years and marketing in various roles. And 3.5 years ago, I went out on my own. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
using all of that good knowledge and best practices that I've learned in big companies, helping small businesses with marketing strategy. So
Yeah.
I really focus on the marketing strategy side of things. I also teach an undergrad marketing class at Metro State, which I
Let's
love
go.
so much.
Yeah.
And then recently, I've also become a children's book author with these little birdies that I've illustrated.
Yeah.
And so that's been another really fun journey. So, marketing, birds, teaching, that's kind of my jam.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to check out the Birdies books. They're pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation too. Most of my conversations are like I've got prepped questions and my guest answers. We're kind of
We
throwing
don't have that.
Yeah, we're throwing a little curveball today. So we're just gonna kind of riff mostly on ideas that I've been having. So it's about me today, about ideas that I've been having about marketers and where I'm seeing marketers today. And I just want to get some of your thoughts on some of this stuff. Sound good?
Sound good? Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So the first thing I'll say is I've been noticing that when prospective customers show up at Augurian, the underlying reason why they're showing up, in my opinion, is because they're lacking confidence in something that's going on in their marketing today. And so I thought it would just be kind of fun to first unpack confidence a little bit. You have marketing clients. When you see people showing up and asking you for help, would you say that I'm intuning that correctly, that there might be kind of a lack of confidence, people feeling like I don't know if I'm doing the right things, or the people that I'm working with aren't doing the right things?
Yeah, I do see that. And oftentimes I'm talking to CEOs and owners, and so they for sure don't really know if marketing is
Right.
going well because they're not the expert. So I think there's some recognition of when someone's not an expert, they're not really sure if they're doing it right, which is
Yeah.
why they pull people like you and me in.
Right.
And so, from a marketing standpoint, if you're a brand marketer, and I'm more on the brand strategy side, so if someone were to ask me to pull together a fully baked SEO strategy, I know what those words mean.
Right.
Could I do and deliver what they're asking?
Yeah.
No. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not confident. I'm just aware of what I don't know.
Yeah.
So it could be some lack of confidence. And I think that might stem from what are their expectations? Like
Sure.
if their boss is expecting them to do all of these things and know all of these things, because as you know, being a marketing generalist, you have to know,
Yeah.
1 inch deep, a mile wide. But then
Yeah.
when someone asks you to get really deep, I think it's really smart that they pull in experts like you,
Right.
especially on the digital side. So it could be a lack of confidence, but it could also just be they know what they don't know and they're smart enough to bring in experts that
Yeah.
do.
I love that. No, that is definitely also true. I would say that I do see people who maybe have more experience on the brand or creative side. Like, you don't want me to do brand creative stuff, right? I'm never going to get you some huge, crazy kind of post that's going to just go viral. That's not what we do, right? We're focused on the data and figuring out how we can get really good incremental, scalable, recurring growth. So it is kind of a different skill set. So I do think you got a good point there about maybe it isn't necessarily a lack of confidence. I'm feeling it because I guess most recently we've just had some examples of people who've shown up and just said we're working with an agency. It's not like we don't like this agency, but we haven't been able to overcome or we're hitting this ceiling, or we haven't been able to do some of the things. And because they
Mhm.
aren't experts in digital, right?
Yeah.
They're like, and I don't know what that is. I don't know why we're bumping up against this ceiling. I don't know why we're, have these challenges, and I need someone to help me solve that. So I
Yeah.
do think there's a whole piece too to some of the things we've been talking about internally, which is like, when do you know when you need to like either build a team in house or bring in an agency partner? And I think that's a challenge for marketers as well, right? It's like, should I build a team around this or should I bring an agency partner? Do you have a perspective on like that at all?
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to that because I want to address something you just mentioned
Okay.
because you said, working with someone that's already with an agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's almost not necessarily the confidence piece, but it's more they know something's not working.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes, and this is where agencies can get reputations that aren't reflective of who they actually are,
Right.
because maybe there hasn't been expectations correctly set with the client,
Yeah.
and maybe the client's not at. So when they start to see maybe the ROAS, or if they're talking about certain metrics and they say, hey, this isn't really working, are they talking to their agency right away? And then is the
Yeah.
agency providing all the information? So there could be a communication gap there,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes marketers just assume that the agency is part of being a good partner is to ask hard questions, push back when you feel like it's
Yeah.
necessary, because it's a partnership. It's not just I give you money and then make things happen for me.
Right.
And I bet in those situations that's sort of the case.
Yeah.
And then the numbers aren't going the right way. They haven't had the tough conversation, and they say we don't, and then the trust gets broken.
Right.
So, and then as far as in-house versus agency, I think it's such a boomerang that happens, because
Yeah.
I've seen it happen where all the money goes to agency. Then they'll say we're spending. Usually, CFO will say, "How much are we spending on agencies?
Right.
We're bringing that in house."
Yeah.
And then leadership changes in 3 to 4 years, and the same conversation.
Yeah.
Depending on their experience with agencies and marketing, I think that's a decision where, unfortunately, it's sort of where the wind blows and where leadership wants to take it
Yeah. No, it's very true. And I do think that like in the boomerang scenario where you've hired an in-house team and you may have really capable, great kind of people, but it's a people business after all. And if somebody goes to a new job, if somebody decides they want something new in their life,
Yeah.
or, paternity, maternity leave, like things happen. And now all of a sudden you're like rebuilding once again.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah.
one of those benefits. I got to talk about the benefits of
Absolutely.
agencies, right?
And
You
and
know,
I think another one is when you bring it in house, and invariably that person's going to end up doing other things for the company.
sure,
So when you go with an agency, you guys are all experts and you live and breathe this stuff day in and day out.
right,
No one's being asked to, hey, there's a PR release. Can you please work, because they don't have anyone else and someone's on vacation? Can you?
yeah,
So usually when you're in house, you're not just doing the thing that
sure,
you're actually hired to
yeah,
do. And part of the job and why agencies can be so great and effective is that you are staying on top of all of the trends.
mm-hmm,
And
yeah,
the digital world, like 5 minutes
fast,
ago, that was great. So
yeah,
I think there's something to be said for working with true experts that understand the space, and you work with other clients so you're able to take all those learnings
yeah,
and help them think about things differently, because you could say, I've got another client that also tried this, here's what we saw. You're not telling them what to do, but you are certainly helping them make very informed decisions.
yeah. Love that. So let's go back to managing
Yeah.
expectations because I feel you mentioned it. You also talked about going into companies where it's the owner, the CEO, and
Yeah.
so they're like,
Yeah.
we need to
Yes.
do these things, and they have very ideas about the way things need to get done.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like that is one of the hardest things to do as an agency, as a marketer in house, is managing expectations of all stakeholders,
Yeah.
managing the expectations of your own team and what you need to get from them, but also, sales and marketing and that connection,
Yeah.
the kind of C suite and what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So, any thoughts about managing expectations of internal stakeholders?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and I almost feel like in some ways we're like wealth advisors, where I cannot guarantee a return,
Mhm.
because that's always the conversation is, we're going to spend this much with you. What are we going to get?
Yeah.
And that's the wrong conversation. It's what needs to be accomplished here. I'm going to help you figure out how to achieve that through various ways. But I think CFOs can be tough. I mean, sometimes I think marketing, and especially digital marketing, people think that it's a faucet, that you all of a sudden turn this faucet out and all the leads come through and all the revenue comes through. And a lot of times I'll work with clients who only want to talk about campaigns. They want to talk about digital marketing. Meanwhile, their messaging is a mess.
Right.
Meanwhile, what they say they do is very different than what their website says. So it's like, I know you want to go here, but we actually have to go here first.
Yeah.
And the ones that are willing to go here first, I know that they are willing to at least listen
Right.
versus focusing on this.
Yeah.
So I do think that, the expectation piece can be tough, but I think if you can at least come in with, here's what we can do for you. Here's what I can't promise you.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are here to grow your company and do all those things, but guaranteed returns are a tough conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, sales versus finance, going into a company and having those separate conversations to understand, like, sales, what do you guys want? You know what? We need more collateral. We need more messaging because what we're saying isn't landing with our customers. And I have nothing to like give people.
Yeah.
Awesome. CFO, what are you hoping for? You know what? We just spent a bunch of money on this. So we really got to make sure. So once you understand what everyone is hoping to get out of this, then you can kind of reflect back in a way that you can control.
Right.
Here's how I can show up for you and kind of hit on all the points that every department wants.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, so I think we focus a lot on trying to get like a shared mindset. So I
Mm,
think that's kind of some of the things that you're talking about. So like we come at it from like marketing is really learning, right?
mm,
Nobody has the silver bullet. There isn't like something that you can just take from one company and repeat it
yeah,
verbatim, and it's just it's going to work, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
can't make those promises, and so what we try to do is tell our clients like we want to build a learning organization, which means that we are going to do all of our audits and all of the things that we need to do to understand like what should be our top priorities and what should be a kind of our roadmap to execute on. And then we need to show up and really like defend that and say, this is what we believe from our area of expertise we need to do first. This is how long it'll take. This is the resources it needs. And once we get that alignment, like, okay, we understand the roadmap, we understand this is what we're trying to, the arc of it for the year, how it connects to kind of the overarching strategy, then here's what we're going to do in the first 90 days to like try to hit that arc, that
yeah,
overarching arc. If we can get alignment on it, now all of a sudden we can like start to just get into the execution of it.
yeah,
And then I think where sometimes marketers get tripped up is they're not great at kind of reporting on that execution. Like, here's how it's going, here's what
yeah,
we're doing, here's the
yeah,
progress that we're making, we're on track, we're off track, here's where we are learning something either because we're like going gangbusters and it's going
mm-hmm,
really good,
yeah,
or this failed, but there's data in failure, and here's what we learned either about our messaging or about how our product compares to the competition or how our competition is going to market and eating our lunch, or how our consumer like sees us, where are the platforms where we can really actually find them.
yeah,
And so we're just all about like we need to build learning organizations. We need to have a learning mindset. As soon as you get into people who are asking you to like promise that you're going to hit
yeah,
these goals, I call those like ride or die KPI chasing organizations. Like we don't even want to work with those
yeah,
people
yeah.
because it's just a mindset that's just really hard, and we believe that like marketing organizations are learning organizations. So that's kind of how we do
I love that. And I also think that reminded me of something that I do with my clients is we establish a marketing scorecard.
it. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what we want to measure,
Yep.
and whether it's every week or every month, we look back. Did it improve? Did it not improve? What impacted that? How are we going to change things? But now there is a measure that everyone agreed was important. What you want,
Yep.
the traffic, you want the social engagement, whatever those things are. And we decide that as a team.
Yeah.
So that way everyone's kind of heard, and then we figure out, okay, are things working? And then the things that are working, how do we do more and double down on those, just like you said.
Yep.
But having a visual scorecard also really helps because then they can see the impact of the
Yep.
marketing activities with numbers.
Right. So we go one step beyond and have almost like a scorecard that we share on our progress on the tasks we're executing on. So
Nice.
it's not
Right.
just like, here's our weekly numbers or monthly numbers, and here's like the insights around why we're up or down,
Love
or
that.
it's
That's so
also
good.
like, here's what we're actively doing. Because I think in digital marketing, sometimes agencies kind of operate like in a black box, like,
Hmm.
ooh, we're
Yeah.
like wizards or
Yeah.
witchcraft or whatever behind the curtain. You don't know what we're doing with SEO. And we try to make it like super transparent. So there's a high degree of accountability. And that just by having like a really strong process, it helps like minimize the kind of somebody dropping in and just saying, we need to go like this other direction. This
Yeah.
isn't working. We need to
Yeah.
go this other direction. And by having that strong process, you can say, great, that's an interesting idea. If it's the CEO, it's like, okay, it's your company. If you want to pivot, we can. But I need to tell you that we agreed on this annual roadmap. Here's where we are in our current execution. And you making this pivot decision is going to, we're going to lose all of this work. We're going to have to pivot ourselves. That's going to take a different set of resources. And so at the end of the day, the CEO can say, "Yeah, but we have to make this pivot," which is fine.
Yeah.
Then we move, then we change and move. But
Yeah.
half the time, more than half the time, it's like, no, just stick. Let's stick to the plan. Like
Yeah.
we'll put
Yeah.
this in the parking.
Okay, this makes me think of a question I want to ask you, because part of that, and that happens, right? The CEO, all of a sudden there's a new direction. And a lot of times it's like, we have not given this enough time.
Right.
Do you have a rule of thumb where you're like, a campaign, an effort, an initiative, we've got to give it at least 4 months or 3 months or 6 weeks? Do you have a rule of thumb you use? Because sometimes it feels like like rugs get pulled out
Yeah.
when we just got started.
Right. So we do, paid media, organic search. So SEO and content are like those two main buckets. Analytics is another service of ours. But when it comes to paid media, the answer, which every marketer will say, is depends, right? So like if we're have budget where we're able to get to statistically relevant data in a week because we can throw, $10,000 at something, then we're ready to pivot. Like it's all about statistically relevant data. And so that is what we use to push back.
Nice.
When we get someone who shows up and says we need to, this isn't working, it's like, well, do we like has it had enough play?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it depends on budget. So there isn't
Yeah.
really like a time frame with paid
Okay.
media. With organic search, it takes time.
It takes time.
It takes time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard. And so we like to
Yeah.
see like our content or our changes to start to move the dial after 6 months. Like we should be having some like early insights that this is working at the 6 month mark. That's kind of how I think about it. And we can have some like quick wins, like wow, or we've come into situations where there's been like technical SEO, and you get those things fixed and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
ta-da, like it's
Yeah.
working. Those are a little bit more few and far between. So I would say, yeah, that depends on the service.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how we think about it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about mindset. Anything else? Like one of the things that I've been reading is this book about polyvagal theory.
Oh,
I don't know if you
say more words.
doesn't that sound super interesting and intellectual? Well,
Especially for a guy in a floral shirt on a Friday.
yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm gonna butcher the concept. So here we go. So you've heard of like fight or flight, right?
Mhm.
And so you have this like vagus nervous system that's been developed. We've talked about like the brain as the lizard brain, and then
Sure.
you have kind of like your thinking brain or whatever. So you have a nervous system that kind of accompanies that. And so polyvagal theory is like talks about there's three different kind of vagus nerves. And again, I'm just reading this and butchering it a little bit, but it's where you see like fight or flight happening. And so there's this kind of green vagus area. So polyvagal means there's three different areas. One is where you feel good, like you
Mhm.
have psychological safety. You feel like that's when you have like the ability to think really entrepreneurially and like be
Yes.
super creative because you feel
Yes.
good, you feel safe, right? You're in a good spot.
Yeah.
As soon as you get into kind of the fight or flight, which is the second one of
Mhm.
these vagals, which I'm butchering, that's where like you actually, your heart rate starts to go up, and you can't think creatively.
Yes.
You like things in your body start shutting down because you're like worried, like I need to preserve myself,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
And so what the third and last one is the freeze phase,
Mhm.
which was kind of what this theory I think tried to describe. Is there's a third phase, there's fight or flight, but then there's a phase where like your body literally shuts down.
Mm.
Like you're getting attacked by a bear, your body literally like shuts down. because there's nothing else that can.
Unless you're Leonardo DiCaprio
Right.
in that one movie,
Yeah. Well, he pretty much shut down,
The Revenant.
and then it just like beat him on the chest, and that was, I can't believe he came back from that, and he's
It's a
still
great movie.
alive.
It's a great movie.
Oh yeah, it's a movie. That's right.
No,
Um,
I love what you're saying. Basically, what you're saying is we've got more mental real estate when we're allowed to be safe and
mhm.
feel like we belong and have that psychological
Right.
safety. Because if you don't, like I think about someone that's worried about losing their job all the time,
Right.
are they going to perform at optimal levels and have the mind space to think creatively and problem solve
Right.
when all they're trying to solve for is how do I keep my job? How do I
Yeah.
keep my job?
Or how do I get that KPI up? They're
Yeah.
looking at that KPI. That's the KPI. Like you just
Yeah.
get to this place where like you just can't kind of um, do your job as well as you could if you had more kind of psychological safety. So anyway, that goes back to this idea of like organizational mindset. You know, you have to, if you build a learning organization, then leaders understand, okay, you might fail, but let's learn, let's get insights from that.
Yeah.
And I'm not just going to like kick you to the curb. I mean, there's a reason why the C-suite CMOs like churn way more than everybody else. And I
Yeah.
think it has a lot to do with like the fact that, we just, a CFO, nobody's showing up in the C-suite and saying to a CFO like, let's talk about how you're managing the company's money,
Yeah.
right? Nobody does that.
You're
But
right.
of course, CFOs are like, let's talk about the marketing, like what kind of
Yeah.
results. Like,
I
I
agree.
just
I
think it's
mean,
crazy that that happens.
in general, everyone thinks they can do marketing's job because
Yeah,
everyone is a consumer of marketing.
right.
So you're right. Like sales folks, customer, everyone's got marketing ideas. But I mean, the psychological safety in marketing, in work, in relationships, in
Yeah.
life, it's critical. Like if you don't feel like you belong and that you're safe and that you're not free to speak your mind
Mm-hmm.
for fear of, retaliation or anything else, you're going to bottle those feelings. So you might know something's not right,
Right.
or you might have a great idea, but you think you're going to get ridiculed,
Right.
or you think the boss is going to say, you know what, that wasn't really appropriate. We've all been in those situations where it's kind of someone's way or the highway.
Right.
And I've worked for leaders like that, and that's really tough. So you feel like you can't challenge them.
Right.
And that absolutely does not create a psychologically safe environment,
Yeah.
which means that team will never actually operate at their best
Right.
because it's one person's ideas that get executed.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like learning organizations with that
Yeah.
mindset will always be better than kind of those what I call ride or die KPI chasing
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And I think then that creates more cohesion with an organization because it becomes less about, well, marketing, did you do your job?
Right.
It becomes as a
Sales,
team.
did you do your job?
Right, right. It becomes as a team, are we performing and are we doing everything we said we were going to do to hit the goals that we want to hit for this year? Like that changes the conversation because there's been too many rooms where, yeah, sales, what's going on? Or marketing, that email didn't perform as high as we thought it was going
Yeah.
to do. What are you doing
Yeah.
differently? That blame game, that psychological safety goes away completely. So
Right.
unless you're a very strong and you got to work up to have the courage
Yeah.
to really own your space in those rooms because very quickly you can just say, okay,
Mhm.
got it. I've been there where okay, got it.
Yeah.
Let's move on,
Right. Yeah. So I think that there's that layer that needs to exist to like really have the excellent kind of nutrients in the organization to then do great work.
Mhm.
Then there's kind of four areas where I've been seeing that like marketing organizations that are like exceptional always get right. So those four areas are like they're aligned on strategy, they're like really clear on their processes, um, they have a clear source of truth. So like the data that they're looking at is shared up with everyone else in the organization. And the last thing is they're just great at communication with
Mhm.
all stakeholders. And I feel like when one of those pieces just isn't quite right, that's when, and even with Augurian, I mean, we've had clients we've been chasing after certain, like we have our reports and we're telling them this is going great, and then they show up with like some other HubSpot report that we never knew they even had,
Yeah.
and they say like it's not going well, look at this report, and we're like, whoa, like we're
Yeah.
not even tracking the same, like we're not
Yeah.
focused on the same numbers. And that's tripped us up in the past, and
Yeah.
we need to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't happen as marketers. So, thoughts on strategy, process, data, communication, how that trips us up, or
Yeah.
how you do it great?
I mean, I think you're right. Those are really strong pillars of awesome marketing. And I
Yeah,
think that you always have to, I mean, it always starts with strategy. Like, you don't get in the car and just start driving. Like, you
right.
have to know where you are driving to. So, strategy 1000%. And good marketers, yes, they have some type of process. Like, I think about with my clients, while my engagements look very different
Mhm.
depending on the size of the organization, what the goal is, all that good stuff. There's usually like a discovery meeting,
Yeah,
and then I'll have meetings with other stakeholders, and then I'll write, like there is some type of process that is repeatable.
yep,
And I think marketers should have that and also should have the leeway of abandoning and creating new processes if they need to.
yeah,
Communication, I mean, 1010%. And I think this is part of marketers' superpowers. Like,
right.
we not only can communicate, but also I think connecting dots in the organization. I think that is something marketing is so much the glue of an
Hmm.
organization. There have been many times that maybe I've met with customer service and I hear about an initiative they're going to work on because marketing needs to help communicate and market that.
Yeah,
And then you sit in a meeting with leadership and you mention this, and the finance guy's like, wait a minute, what are they doing over there?
right.
And sometimes departments don't always talk, and marketing should be the through line through an organization because we're communicating, we're connecting customers and the organization.
Yeah,
And so that communication, I think, is just inherent with every marketer. Like, we should be good at communicating
yeah.
to different groups, pulling things together, connecting dots. And then what was the fourth one?
Data.
Oh, yeah, data. The most important one.
Yeah,
I think that also goes to the technology that has happened over the last 20 years. Marketing is no longer like a gut feel business.
yeah,
And I think for a long time it was. And so making sure that everyone's clear on what are those measurables? What are all the metrics we agree to? And luckily there's so many dashboards and ways that you can pull those together. But I think the biggest thing with the data is everyone's agreeing on what is being measured. Because you're to
right.
your point of like somebody pulling in a new report, wait, did we talk about this report? Like, where did this
Yeah,
report come from?
right.
So I think everyone has to agree on here the numbers we think mean something.
Yeah,
And the good part about marketing now is that there are numbers. And even though attribution gets really messy,
yeah,
I think time based attribution is really interesting where there might be 7 things happening. But
yeah,
if we know in August those 7 things were happening, you can probably bet if the numbers are all going up, it had to do with all of these things. And as we know as consumers, it's not just one marketing thing that makes us act,
yeah,
right? We saw the campaign, we clicked on the link, we looked at the
yeah.
website, we said like there's so many things. So I think the data and attribute, like what's your take on attribution now? Like, how do you have that conversation? Because I feel like for a while it was stronger than it is now, and now it feels like can we believe attribution and reports?
Yeah. It's a hard question. I
It
think it really, again, depends
depends.
on what, like, if we're talking about e-commerce, like, there's some
Yeah.
pretty clear attribution that can be had. There's lots of different models. We just don't end with like last click attribution.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
very, very lazy. So, you can get some more complex attribution models where you see like assisted conversions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we think about our own behavior, we're going online, we may see something on LinkedIn, we kind of store it in our head, and then we decide to go, like, what was the name of that company? And then we decide to go back, and
Yeah.
maybe we see something, and then we leave again, and then all of a sudden we get retargeted on paid media somehow, and then we go and we book the demo, or we buy the thing, or we do
Yeah.
the whatever. And if you're just like, oh, paid media is just killing it for us, well, no, we had organic social in there, we may have had like a webinar, we may have,
Yeah.
so I do think that attribution is super difficult, but it really depends on the business,
Yeah.
right? If it's like B2B, the sales cycle's 9 months, the deal values, $15 million, you've got multiple stakeholders, it gets
Yeah.
it gets super hard and
Yeah.
messy. So I think when we are working with companies like that, all we're trying to show them is like the piece of content that we created.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of those like rocks across the river, right? That somebody hops to. So we just need to prove that like that is actually a good rock, and it is helping their people kind of cross that chasm. So
Yeah. Okay. So that just made me think of something on the consumer side, and I want your opinion on this. So this is
okay,
more B2C. I've heard, that my Instagram algorithm just gets me, right? It's feeding me all the right things to
Okay.
buy. And I had a friend and she bought something and I'm like, "Where'd you get that?" She was like, "Honestly, Instagram made me do it."
Yeah.
And I bought it because I was so sick of getting the ads. It was like, "Fine,
Oh, wow.
uncle, I will buy this
Yeah,
thing."
yeah, yeah.
How do you feel about, like, is that successful? Because ultimately she bought the thing,
Yeah.
but the reason she bought it was because the ad was annoying and she didn't want to see it anymore.
So,
What say you to that?
I say that people always try to have like a logical reason for doing something that's emotional.
Mhm.
That's my take on that. So I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, I bought a convertible,
You did.
but this is what I tell everybody. Everybody who asks you, you're like, "Oh, you did," and I'm
Oh,
like, if
that's
everybody who
tracks.
asks me, I tell them, but it's a convertible that's front wheel drive. It has heated seats and it's a hard top. So I drive it in the winter as
Yeah.
well. So my rationalization
Bringing
is
logic.
I bought a car. What I did is I just bought a car that I drive year round.
Yeah.
Like that's not whimsical. That's not like just like a
Yeah.
pleasure that I'm giving myself. It just happens to be a convertible. So in my head,
You're
so I would say if we like actually sat your friend down and said,
Mhm.
okay, so like you got your arm twisted, but you wanted
Mhm. There's
you
something about
wanted
that.
that. You really wanted that. Come
Yeah.
on, let's
Yeah.
be
All right. I like
truthful.
that. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Have you ever bought something like that and then had a whole rationalization of does that happen to you every day?
I mean, I think not every day, but that
Go get a
example.
coffee, like the $7 coffee at Spy House. It's
Oh
like,
yeah, that's right next door, isn't it?
yeah, I need a 7.
You do need full spy house is good. That's good. I think I don't know if I buy I think, right? Like I'm using my logical brain now to
Yeah,
it's an emotional thing. But I will say when you see ads, the more you see ads, the more you're like it's almost like a little worm that digs deeper
yeah,
into your brain. And I sometimes after the 10th time of seeing something, it's like, oh, that shirt really looks good. You know what? I've got the perfect skirt to go with it.
yeah,
Or it just by showing up more and more, you kind of need it more and
yeah.
more. So yeah, maybe that's
Maybe. Well, that's a good way to end. We'll just let
it.
everybody kind of ponder their emotional buying decisions that they try to rationalize and how marketing can like get that worm in your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should do this again. This was
I
super
love
fun.
that. It
Yeah.
was.
All right,
Thanks for
awesome.
having me.
Thanks, Heather. That'll wrap it up for this edition of Small but Mighty Marketers podcast. Thanks.